As I'm sure all of you know already, this event is essentially, this panel discussion is to talk about Chicago and Chicago's place in the creative advertising community, where it's been, where it is currently, and where it's heading. And we've got a panel of 4 people here, are more than qualified to talk about that. Starting from my immediate right, we have Vincent Geraghty, who's the Executive Vice President and Executive Director of Production for Leo Burnett in Chicago. Popular guy. And next to Vincent, we have Jared Yeater, who's the Managing Director of the Mill in Chicago. Maybe even slightly more popular. Next to Jared, we have Matthew Wood, partner and editor at Whitehouse Post.
Hello, everyone.
Wow. Okay. So Rick's got a lot to live up to. So on the end there, we have Rick Hamann, who's the Senior Vice President of the Onion Labs. Hello. Okay. So I'm going to say about Chicago. How much does a city really impact on a company and a business? Can a city make a difference to what you do and how you do it in any way, shape, or form? And as you're sitting closer to me, Vincent, maybe if you'd like to start.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Chicago has a pretty storied history as a creative city, from architecture to art. You know, we have one of the finest art schools in the country with the Art Institute, Columbia College, massive art presence. And I think it's an environment that fosters creative thinking, and I think it's evident in the neighborhoods around the city. You know, there's not so many overly gentrified neighborhoods. There's a lot of artistic neighborhoods and a lot of artists who love the city and call it home. And I think it is kind of a mecca for the Midwest, at least, not just for industrial arts like advertising, but for full-on art communities, and I think it's been that way for quite a while.
Jared, you know, the Mill opened here 18 months ago or so. Yeah. So I mean, do you think that Chicago has had an impact on how those 18 months have been, and you know, and the Mill Chicago itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the New York and LA. I mean, I guess for us, London, which is obviously a big center for where we started. Or I guess are what we would kind of compare it to, and you know, those cities are full of, I mean, their own sort of industries. You could even call them distractions in certain ways. So I think that what Chicago does is it's so kind of diverse and free of some of the the specific kind of distractions that you might find in New York and LA, Hollywood, or just New York being just the center of just the corporate world and the world. That Chicago allows you to be a bit freer, I think, maybe to explore different things, whether it's creatively, technologically. There's just a little bit less pressure to keep your head above water and more opportunity to explore, really. And I think certainly our staff has felt that since opening, and getting people here to move here was not actually very difficult, primarily because Batman was shot here. So that made it, at least the Brits, that was pretty much their only frame of reference. But yeah, I think it's a great place for people to do good work.
Matthew, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I've always I've been here for 10 years. Will be on November the 1st, and I've always seen Chicago as a kind of a dark horse. You know, it doesn't quite have the shout about itself like New York. Or the sort of laissez-faire of LA. It just feels like it, certainly creatively, I think there's, you know, it's on par with any center in America. But it, you know, it kind of quietly goes about its business and surprises people. So I would say that's my take on how it sits in the advertising world.
Is Chicago able to compete with, you know, people have mentioned New York and LA and those different cities and big, advertising meccas, places like London. Can Chicago, and is Chicago competing with those places? And are they on a similar or the same creative level to those cities, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Chicago has its own creative vibe, and I think that it's on par with any major city, any major advertising or creative town in the world. I think it's different, but I think that it holds itself up creatively to anywhere.
You know, we have the reason why Chicago, I think, started as such a hub for advertising is packaged goods. And you know, back in the day, Leo Burnett, when he decided to create an advertising company, he did it in Chicago because that's where a lot of the companies were and within proximity. And I think it's become a bit of a, you know, I've been in the business a little bit of time, and back in the early 90s, we used to shoot a lot of stuff here. And that kind of went away at some point. Whether it was through perception or reality, people felt that the actual creation of content was best done either on the West Coast or the East Coast. And I think what's changed is the way that we capture content and the channels we have to fulfill, and how many different channels there are. Whereas 10 years ago, you had broadcast, print, radio. You now have 50 channels that you've got to put content out on. And I think that's actually working to the advantage of the production environment in Chicago. You know, the game's changed. And you no longer have every project that has the $250,000 shoot day. You have the projects that I've got $25,000. How are we going to get this done? And I think there's a bit of a scrappy mentality, and I don't know if you guys agree, but with the Chicago environment, not necessarily post-production, but production, we can get that done. And there are people in this environment that want to work in that area, and we need to work in that area. You know, just from an industry standpoint, we're not going to have the $250,000 shoot days on every single project, and it's not right for every project. If you have a project that has no media buy behind it, the client is not going to want to spend that sort of money. So that's where I've seen like I guess the renaissance, if you will, of production in Chicago is those sort of projects.
I think you asked, can it compete? I think with New York and LA, I think it already is. It has for as long as it's been around. I mean, you look at the great work that DDB did back in the sort of late 90s and up through the mid 2000s. You look at the fact that Tony the Tiger, one of the most recognizable characters ever been created,
Leo Burnett,
which was Leo. Well, no, I was getting there. Which was Leo Burnett in the 50s. Is incredible, and to have that kind of a mark on advertising across the world. It's not about now competing with New York and LA. It's always been its own thing.
How about sort of barriers to creativity? I mean, Rick, what do you feel at the moment are there any barriers that still need to be overcome, or things that need to change or improve to really kind of push Chicago forward, or keep it moving in the direction that it seems to have been moving?
Yeah, I think that the number one barrier to creativity is process, and I think that the more hurdles that you have to jump over to get to an execution, the more an idea suffers. And so I think that the more the industry as a whole, and especially the industry in Chicago, can break down those barriers to ideas and just make sure that we shepherd them throughout the entire process, or shorten the process, or make the process more streamlined, I think the better the work will always be.
And how can you do that? How is that achievable?
I think less people. Yeah, less people that sign off on an idea. I think the ability to brief an idea and make sure that the number of hands that touch that idea are counted on less than one hand, I think will make sure that the work is good. We in labs we have one guy. The work comes through the creative department, and we have a singular person that gives the okay to that before it goes to the client. And we really try to make sure that that we don't overthink, that we don't contemplate ideas for hours and hours, and that we make sure that there are key people in the process that we trust, and those people have unlimited ability to say yes or no. And until that process gets broken, we're going to go with that.
And so, Onion Labs is obviously a nimble, smaller, less people company, and is obviously set itself around doing that. Vincent, Leo Burnett, obviously, I guess the opposite of that to many degrees. Is that something that's possible? Do you agree, firstly, do you agree with what Rick says? Is that the changing of that process, is that going to be an important factor in pushing Chicago forward? And also, can companies such as Leo Burnett, big multinationals, achieve a sort of nimble approach to the way that work is put out?
Yeah, I think we have to. Otherwise, he's going to take all my clients.
That's Onion Labs.
So no, I mean it's absolutely. I mean it comes back to when I'm saying like there's more opportunity now in Chicago than ever to produce stuff locally. We have to think about the process differently, and part of that is, to your point, having key decision makers in the room. Like I don't want 4 weeks to approve an edit on a 30-second commercial. Like that's expensive and it's stupid, and so we have to get past that. And I actually think the same way that these guys have upped the game from a post-production point of view in Chicago, guys like The Onion have upped the game as far as how we have to look at the way we approach projects. And I think that's all it's good for the whole industry in Chicago to have, great editorial, great post-production. Not that there wasn't great post-production before, but having people come in who are upping the game, and I've said this too many times to these guys, but the tide rises all boats, and I think it's a very positive thing to have great creative talent, and also people like The Onion who are figuring out how to be very nimble, as opposed to the old school way that we used to do work. In general, I think it's a great thing.
It feels like people kind of have welcomed the Mill and obviously the success of the White House,
right.
And it feels like it's a kind of a close-knit community that feeds off each other. That your success is in part going to improve them.
I think that's also because both our companies. I mean, we have a multi-office company within the States and London and Amsterdam, so it kind of feels like even though you're working within Chicago, that we provide a more of an international field, so that it's not just the 8 editors that work in our company, but it's the other 43 editors that are around the world that is a possibility for them. And I think that's that's why for me it's very refreshing that the Mill have also, because ultimately they know that they've got talent on the coast and they brought talent to Chicago. It's like, I think it's the ability to just say, well, we are flexible about what we can provide.
We think it's a good thing, obviously, that we've come in and brought some of our people and some of our our culture and stuff like that. But and there's a little bit of a shock. I know when that happens, and it probably affects certain businesses and clients. But I think in the end, the goal certainly for us, and I would hope everyone would feel this way, as Vincent said, the tide rises all boats, and that's not just in terms of quality of work, but it's also just in terms of a community. I think our hope is that we help not just work come to the Mill, but work come to all companies here, and that it helps legitimize somewhat the community that was already here. And I know it's a bit of an arrogant thing for me to say that. I'm not saying I'm helping all of those companies who struggle. They're great companies, but I'm just saying the more we can convince our great clients like Leo Burnett and The Onion to do more work here, and other companies outside of Chicago to do work here, the better it is for everybody here. So that's a goal, no question.
How much can we attribute to what more than a few people have said to me is the kind of Chicago work ethic to how successful Chicago's been in the recent past. And I think you said earlier, there's a mentality of we can get this done, and a couple of people have said how it's kind of a head down, get on with it, and kind of don't really take too much notice of what other cities are doing, what other areas are doing. Just get on with it. Is the Chicago work ethic a real thing? I mean, is it actually something that's tangible and is a real part of what Chicago is? Anyone? Rick?
Well, I think that Chicago, the personality of Chicago is very hardworking. This is a blue-collar town, and this sense that people are willing to just, roll up their sleeves and get something done. I think that we feel that in the production community as well, that you might not have the $250,000 a day budget, and I think that there's a real sense that if the work is good, and that if there's passion behind it, that people are willing to do whatever it takes to get something done. And we've found that the production community is, in Chicago in particular, is willing to say, I love that idea, I'm going to maybe sacrifice something to get it done, but I think that we'll all be happy with the output.
Does anyone else have to agree? I mean, did you feel like Matthew as being not from, you've been here for 10 years, but did you feel that Chicago has got that kind of different mentality to other cities?
Yeah, I think also there's a calmness about working really hard. In London, a collective noun of editors is called a moan of editors, and certainly in New York, you could describe some of the creative process as being quite hyper and quite neurotic. But at the same time, there is something about that people in Chicago, creatives, whoever, just when it becomes really hard work, people just bear up to it and just get on with it. I mean, I certainly, a lot of assistants at our company who have come out of, let's say, Columbia Film School, or I am absolutely amazed about how they are just willing to, set aside their life and really put themselves on the line every day. And it's not as though you're coaxing, or it's a genuine desire to. I want to be in the filmmaking process, and I want to be here.
Okay. And does that sort of go hand in hand with, again, we've kind of discussed this earlier or yesterday about how Chicago doesn't really shout about itself. It's got no, or certainly less of an ego than other cities. But does that need to change? I mean, should that change? Should Chicago shout about itself more? Should it be more proactive in telling people how good it is and what it does and how well it does the job that it's supposed to do and creates this great work? Or, should it just carry on doing what it does and not worry too much about how the rest of the world, or certainly the rest of the United States, perceives it? Vincent, I don't know if you have a view.
Yeah,
on
I mean, it's tough because, I don't think it's a city of arrogance at all. But you look at some of the things just historically that the city has done, they're pretty brilliant. And not to get all historical, but you look at a book like The Devil in the White City, which discusses the World's Fair back in 1895. They built a city on the south side of Chicago in like a year out of paper mache, basically. There's one building left, the Science and Industry Museum, or there are several, but that's the most prominent, which was actually built out of a structure. But they're like, shit, yeah, we can do this. And thanks for the opportunity. We'll build it in a year, or a year and a half, or whatever it was. But I don't know why that is, but that's the way Chicagoans think. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of. I'm astounded, to your point. I'm astounded by the work ethic of the folks in my department, and the pride that they get out of. Okay, I just worked 4 straight days, 4 24-hour days in a row. But I'm so proud of what I did, and I think that's a huge part of what Chicago has to offer.
So thank you, guys. So hopefully that has been informative and useful. So thank you to Vincent, to Jared, Matthew and Rick, and thank you guys again for turning up and making this all worthwhile. Otherwise we're just sitting here talking to ourselves. And please stay, have a drink, have a chat to people, and yes, thanks again.